Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everybody. We are live. This is Real Combat Media MMA Radio. I am your host, Isaac Lanford, coming to you from the Circle City, Indianapolis, Indiana. On my panel today, unfortunately, my co-host, David Hollywood Hewlett, still out with the flu, but I am joined by amateur competitor and my younger brother by coincidence, Thor Lanford. Thor, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. How's it going?
Very, very, very good. We got a pretty good show here tonight. We're going to be talking about Bellator results. We're going to be talking about what happened over in Asia this weekend. We're going to be talking, of course, UFC results, Bellator preview, World Series of Fighting preview, and UFC preview. We've got a makeup interview coming with Quinn Mulhern, welterweight turning lightweight in the UFC, and Indiana-based prospect and Thor, one of your training partners, Brady the Hovermale, lightweight fighter who's got a fight coming up in St. Louis that he's going to talk to us about. You can join in the conversation, yes, you the listener, by calling in at 347-324-5998. You can also find us on Twitter at Real Combat Media and Facebook. Just type in Real Combat Media. Now, let's get in. We had a fantastic weekend of fights here. Before getting into the bigger promotions, I want to point out some things that happened over the weekend. In Asia, in ONE FC, Shinya Aoki made his featherweight. Are you even aware of this, or he made his featherweight debut this weekend?
I did. I just knew that he was fighting. I didn't know that he moved featherweight.
Yeah, and of course, Shinya Aoki, he pulled it off. He got the win. I have to say, I'm honestly surprised. This has to have bigger implications for Shinya Aoki to be dropping a weight class, because his only stumbles as a lightweight have been, Eddie Alvarez and a couple of fights here and there throughout his career, kind of freak occurrences. He got kneed in the head by the transgender-looking kickboxer over there in Japan. But for him to be dropping weight, he's got to be making a move somewhere, because that seems odd for him to do at this point in his career, especially over in ONE FC. It doesn't seem like a necessary thing for him.
Yeah, what was his record his past few fights? I mean, maybe just trying to find some new success. That would be my only guess.
Yeah, and I think, that's got to be right, because, let me pull him up as we're talking about it, just so we can say this for sure. Let's see, where are you at, Aoki? I'll pull him up here as we're talking. But it surprised me to see, because the guy, he beats everyone. So why exactly does he need to be making the change? I don't know. Maybe another chance to come stateside. I got him here. His last loss was Eddie Alvarez in 2012. He's gone 4-0 at this point, so it was 3-1 going into this fight with Cody Stevens at featherweight. And before the Eddie Alvarez loss, he hadn't lost since 2010, and the loss before that was when he went to go fight Gilbert Melendez in Strikeforce. So his only losses since 2009, when he was knocked out by Sakurai, have been the two times that he's come to the States. Or, I'm sorry, he did beat Lyle Beerbaum in Strikeforce, but his losses have been in the States since 2009. That makes me think he's looking to rejuvenate and looking for another jump across the ocean here.
Yeah, that's what I would think. To stay relevant in the United States, you have to cut weight.
For sure. Also on the same card, I have to say I wasn't as hip to this when I heard that Bibiano Fernandez just unified the bantamweight belts in ONE FC. I have to be honest when I say I don't even know what that was about. I don't know why there were two different bantamweight belts going on, because he was competing there for a while. unless he was the interim champion, and I don't follow ONE FC enough to know what was going on. But the fact of the matter there is that he did unify those titles. And Bibiano Fernandez, like, from what I heard, he had offers on the table. Like, he was a lot of people were talking to him, and he kind of just decided to go this route. It was a bit surprising to me. He's a guy 15-3 at bantamweight. He fought as a featherweight for a while. His last loss coming in 2010 at K1 Dynamite against Takia. I mean, he's got wins over Joachim Hansen, wins over Joe Warren. Like, he's all over the place. A 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fight winning streak right now. But he said ONE FC is what makes the most sense for him and his family. It's who's paying him what he wants, and that's going to be his home for a while. Excuse me, I was taking a drink of water there. The other thing I want to point out is XFC this past weekend on the 18th. Brian the Law Hall, who we talked to last week, unfortunately lost his fight by unanimous decision. Not only a loss, but not an exciting fight that worked its way into the live card. So sorry to Brian Hall. But we did see a very impressive performance once again from Luis Santos. And if you're not familiar with Luis Santos, the guy came around from Brazil. He fought in Bellator. He went 2-2 under Bellator's banner. He walked out on 2 losses. Since has gone 4-0 fighting for XFC with 1 fight in smash fights. No fight has gone longer than 1 minute and 2 seconds since he left Bellator. The first, Shamar Bailey, he took out in 1 minute. Sebastian Latorre in 22 seconds. Dave Kurchain in 10 seconds. And now Justin Davis in 33 seconds with a blocked head kick and punches on the ground. I'd say Luis Santos, if we don't see him back in Bellator, it's going to be the UFC or World Series of Fighting here. He's a welterweight. It's a great division with exciting fights. Luis Santos is a beast. Are you familiar with this guy, Thor?
The more that you've been talking about him, I think I do know who that guy is, and you have to respect a person who is finishing, consistently fast.
Yeah, I mean, that's impressive. Level of competition is definitely something to be said here. He finished Shamar Bailey fast, and Shamar Bailey is a solid wrestler. He's not an outstanding wrestler, but he's a solid wrestler for sure.
He's very tough too. Shamar is a tough guy. Even if you beat him, like he takes a lot of guys into decisions. It seems like he hangs in there.
Yeah, for sure. One of the bigger cards over the weekend, we saw Bellator 104, Hahn versus Weidman. Rick Hahn has the esteemed privilege of being the only guest that we've had on the show to win his fight that he was on promoting. So no bad juju to our guest tonight, but it's been kind of a bad trend so far. And it was a great card. Really good fights. On the undercard, some of the things that I didn't see, I'd say most notable there, Robert Emerson. If you give a lot of attention to him, won his fight by heel hook. Paul Sass also picked up a toe hold submission finish, which you do not see in MMA very much anymore.
No, not
Peter Graham.
Frank Mir.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Frank Mir. That's probably the last one I saw. Peter Graham took out Eric Prindle in a fight that it was unanimous decision, and it was one of those where it just, heavyweight is such a hit and miss division. Like, this turned into 2 guys that were really tired, leaning on each other a lot, and swinging arm punches. Not very exciting. Kendall Grove looked good to pick up a unanimous decision over Joe Vitipo. Pretty decent fight there. Ron Kessler gets the upset over War Machine. And honestly, it was an upset in name only. Like, War Machine's a hit-and-miss fighter on himself. Ron Kessler maybe not as known, but he came in and made really short work of War Machine. And it should be noted that this guy is on a 6-fight winning streak now. He's got a record of 11-3. He's a serious dude. He's got a lot of submissions, and he worked War Machine. He took him down, got his back, fought for the rear naked choke until he got it. It took almost the entire round, but he did pull it off. And then Rick Hahn takes the decision from Brent Weidman. Good fight. I was surprised how small Rick Hahn looked. I know he's been fighting at lightweight, and so, he's probably still slimmed down quite a bit, but Brent Weidman just looked a lot bigger than him. But it was a unanimous decision. Hahn's hands looked good. He dropped Weidman a couple of times. He seemed more content to keep it on the feet. Weidman's tough as nails. It was a good scrap. Pretty good night of fights over there for Bellator. Kudos to them because I was kind of hating on their card a little bit. I thought it was one of the less glorious ones that they've had going on for a while. Were you able to catch any of the Bellator card, Thor?
That I did not catch. I did know it was going on. I do listen to the show, so I knew the guys, and I was pulling for Rick Hahn. I liked him, in the interview, and I'm so impressed with his judo background.
Yeah, I mean, this guy, any Olympian who is fighting has a real advantage, just pure athleticism. I mean, we see a lot like, NCAA wrestlers in MMA nowadays, and that's great, and that is really high level, but Olympic level is a different thing. That they always shower King Mo because King Mo wasn't as decorated as some other guys like Olympic style, but he was an international wrestler, and that's some serious competition. Rick Hahn, that same level from the judo world. And what's interesting with judo is that you don't get to showcase it as much because those big flashy tosses and stuff are a little hard to pull off at the high level. But the base, once they're in the ground in those positions, that's when it definitely starts to shine through, in my opinion.
Yeah, and they say you can't teach punching power, but it seems like most high-level judo guys, they hit really hard, and I really wonder if it's that core strength, that you're maneuvering so much that can transfer into that punching power.
Yeah, I'm sure that does have a lot to do with it. Like, it's something that when you've been competing on the highest levels that you can possibly compete at, you bring it over, that work ethic and the drive and everything combined it puts you on a step above. And you kind of see it when you see a fight against like a Brent Weidman, who's super tough guy, athletic, against anybody else. Before I knew that Rick Hahn was in this tournament, like if you go back a couple of episodes of this show, right before Rick Hahn stepped in, we didn't know who this fourth matchup, the two competitors that were jumping into the tournament were, and Weidman was my pick to win. And as soon as Hahn entered in, it kind of threw a monkey wrench in that. I'd say the only disappointment on the large scale for fans is I think that people really wanted to see a War Machine Rick Hahn. That was what the sexiest final would have been for this. But again, I say, kind of in name only. War Machine, we know who War Machine is. He fought in the UFC. He's had problems. He's been in the media. TMZ reported on War Machine a few times. He made a porno. For God's sake, he changed his name so that he couldn't be sued by Marvel Comics. But, yeah, I mean, it doesn't translate always back into fighting. Not to say anything away from War Machine. He's a tough guy. But he really got exposed in the Kessler fight. So now we get Kessler against Hahn. And the scary thing about that for Kessler is that he's a wrestler or a grappler. He's a submission guy, and I don't know how good of a chance he has of submitting the judo Olympian.
Yeah, that's the thing too. I think judo, you can stifle so much. I mean, think of all the judokas that, if a guy like Akiyama, it pops into my mind. Yeah, he got tapped by Chris Lieben a few years ago, but look how tired and exhausted he was. He just kind of slept on it. That was not even locked in fully, but it seems like judo, when those guys are on top, it's almost impossible to do anything to them. Yushin Okami, great example. Yeah, for sure. And Yushin Okami, I think, is often confused as a wrestler because of how his style is. But it's judo. You can see it like when Yushin Okami isn't tail stunning double leg takedowns on guys usually. He's usually backing them up, getting a hold of them, and taking their base out from underneath them. But it's just that when he sits on top of them, he's always been thought of as a more American-style ground and pounder. But it is the judo base, and you take that judo base and then you go train with Chael Sonnen like Yushin Okami did. I mean, that really creates a monster right there. That's a really difficult thing to deal with. Because you've mentioned before when we talked about like Ronda Rousey that sometimes in side control she does like the judo side control and lays on her hip, and how often she loses position because of it. Yeah, she's gotten her back taken a few times, and considering we've never even seen her out of the first round, that's when you're the driest, and people have stuck to her back for a few minutes. Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah, Bellator, good card for us, all that. I think what I'm going to do, we're about 15 minutes in here, and we've got Quinn Mulhern coming up at quarter till the hour. I think I'm going to go ahead and throw us to commercial right now because I know that we're going to be able to spend at least that much time talking about UFC 166 that just happened. So let's go to commercial, and we will be back in a minute and 30 seconds.
This is Real Combat Media Radio. Check us out at realcombatmedia.com. While you're there, check out the Feed the Poor link on the bottom of every article, and you can send a donation if you're interested. That is, once again, on the bottom of every article as well as on the top of the website. If you are an MMA, boxing, or fitness business and interested in sponsoring our website or radio podcast, send us an email. Advertising at realcombatmedia.com. Once again, that is advertising at realcombatmedia.com. Make sure to check out the Real Combat Media MMA and boxing store at the top of the menu at realcombatmedia.com. We carry a collection of products. We have the Cardio Mask, which is excellent for all fighters, endurance athletes, and serious fitness enthusiasts. Once you are in the Real Combat Media store, click on the banner on that page. We also carry Alpha Brain. Alpha Brain is a great and natural product which activates your brain's neurotransmitters and helps you think more clearly, which improves brain function. You can also purchase the world's healthiest plant protein, which comes from hemp. There are many other products online on the online store, and click on the On It banner at the Real Combat Media store, and you can purchase Alpha Brain and other health products. Use the discount code Real Combat Media, and you will receive 10% off at the checkout store on the On It. That is ONNIT on the banner at Real Combat Media store. Buckle up. Here we go. Let's get this show started.
All right, we are back, Real Combat Media MMA Radio. Once again, if you would like to join the conversation, call us at 347-324-5998, at Real Combat Media on Twitter, Real Combat Media on Facebook. I have got a Twitter account as well if you really want to get a hold of me. It is ISAACLANDFERT. And my co-host for the evening and younger brother, Thor Lampert, I'm assuming you have a Twitter account as well?
Yeah, the one that I use is at Thorilla.
At Thorilla. 1 R or 2?
2 R's.
2 R's. At Thorilla. Got it. All right, so we're going to go into now, we're going to talk about UFC 166 that just happened this past Saturday, the 19th, in Houston, Texas, at the Toyota Center. We saw fights on Facebook. We saw fights on Fox Sports 1. We saw fights on pay-per-view. Fights all over the place. I'm going to start we have this debate, Thor. Do you know the answer? Is the first fight of the night, is that the top of the card or the bottom of the card? I still don't know this.
I guess that's the top. The top of the card is what you would say, but it's actually on the bottom. Listed-wise, I don't know.
I prefer to call it the bottom of the card because the bottom sounds inferior to the top. So that's I would agree. I don't care how it goes. That's how from now on. That's how I'm saying it. So we started off the night. We had Hyojo Kuraguchi against Dustin Pegg. He beats Dustin Pegg by TKO in round 2. Andre Philly comes in, a late replacement, and takes out Jeremy Larson by TKO in the second round. We have Tony Ferguson picking up submission of the night with a Darce choke over Mike Rio. Adlan Amagov defeats TJ Waldberger by knockout in the first round. That snuck its way onto the pay-per-view as well. We go on to Fox Sports 1, we have KJ Noons against George Sotiropoulos. KJ gets the unanimous decision. Jessica I gets the split decision over Sarah Kaufman. Hector Lombard impresses in welterweight debut against Nate Marquardt with a first-round knockout. Tim Bosch takes split decision from C.B. Dalloway. You hit the pay-per-view with John Dodson getting knockout of the night over Daryl Montague in the first round. Gabriel Gonzaga looking to impress and keep his run going since coming back from retirement. He takes out Sean Jordan in the first round by a TKO. Gilbert Melendez and Diego Sanchez are named on the spot to have the best fight in UFC history. We'll see if that sticks until the next pay-per-view. They get fight of the night with Gilbert taking a unanimous decision. Daniel Cormier, in his last fight as a heavyweight, defeats Roy Nelson by unanimous decision. And Cain Velasquez defends his title against Junior Dos Santos, winning by TKO, listed as strikes. We'll talk about whether that's the case or not. In round 5 at 3 minutes and 9 seconds, I did see a stat that is the latest stoppage in a heavyweight fight in the UFC's history there. And let's just start with the main event here. Cain Velasquez, Junior Dos Santos, their third fight. Obviously, first fight on Fox, Junior drops Cain in the first round, knocks him out. Second fight, Cain Velasquez puts a 5-round beating on Junior Dos Santos. They each have one fight that they win. Then we get the third fight in the trilogy. And a little bit more of the same. Cain Velasquez comes in, pushes Junior Dos Santos against the cage, hammers him, knees him, punches him. Doesn't take him down very often, although he tries many, many times. Junior threw a lot of elbows. He'd break away. He'd throw big punches. He'd get pushed back against the fence. One big punch, and was it the third round that he took the big punch?
I think so. I think that was the third round.
I think it was the knockdown in the third round. And then he's just knocked silly, essentially, for the rest of the fight. It goes. He's getting the hell beat out of him, shows moments of offense, until he goes for a loose guillotine choke that he pulls and falls flat on his face that appeared to knock him unconscious, and the referee stopped the fight in the fifth round. Obviously this was an accumulation of what had been going on throughout the entire fight, but the actual stoppage did in fact come from Junior Dos Santos landing on his face on the mat when he went for the choke. Thor, what are your thoughts on our heavyweight title fight from Saturday night?
Well, honestly, this is what I heard. I heard one of two things people predicting. I heard either, basically the same thing was going to happen either from the first fight or the same thing would happen from the second fight. Generally, I don't think that a rubber match goes like the way that either fight went, but it just, to me, before Junior took the big damage that I think he was just, on autopilot, he had no footwork off of the fence. He was just waiting for Cain, and I don't understand that strategy at all. I do not understand it.
Yeah, it appeared to me like after the fight, Cain says that he got better, but so did Junior, and maybe so. Maybe they were both improved. I couldn't tell they were both improved because they looked to be the exact same fighters as the last time they fought. If they did improve, it was on such an equal ground that I couldn't tell the difference. But Junior Dos Santos did not look like he learned anything from the last fight. He still had his hands at his hips. He wasn't evading the fence whatsoever. He was basically planting his feet, throwing a big punch as Cain rushed him. Cain Velasquez is the best heavyweight in the world. He just proved it. That's fine. Good job, good game plan. People get frustrated because Cain probably could finish Junior Dos Santos if he really laid it on. Maybe. Junior looks like he took what no other man can take in there. But it kind of, to me, it has like a Sugar Ray Robinson, Jake LaMotta thing going on. Like Cain Velasquez is obviously, he's better. He's proven it. He's a better fighter. But he can't beat him. He can, granted, this was a stoppage. Like I said, it was a stoppage because Junior fell on his face. Not to say it wouldn't have been stopped. Who knows? I can't, predict what would have happened. But it was one of those you never put me down type things. Like, he beat the hell out of Junior Dos Santos, and Junior's smiling and laughing after the fight.
Yeah. Although I did hear Junior thought that the fight stopped in the second round.
Oh, really? So he was like, his brain was scrambled. Yeah,
he didn't know what was going on. I've heard the argument that it probably should have been stopped. I know when I was watching it live that when he was dropped in the third round, and I did check that it was the third round, when Cain's hammering on him, I was like, holy shit, why is he still hitting him? And then he rolled over and grabbed his ankle. So, evidently Herb Dean could see something that I couldn't see there because it looked like the fight should have. It looked like he was getting drilled right in his face over and over on the ground. But then when he was up and he got punched and he just kind of slid across the cage with his hands at his hips. And at one point, Herb Dean even put his hands on Cain's shoulders. Yeah.
The fight definitely could have been stopped in that third round. And I don't know how much complaining could have been done because if they would have stopped it right there, Junior would have had a hard time walking away from the cage. That was a rough threat. I know that Dana White said that. Yeah, go ahead.
Dana White said, they should have thrown the towel in. And you know what? I think it ultimately in the heavyweight championship fight, when your guy gets destroyed like that in the round, I mean, it's kind of, the referee puts it in your corner's hands, He does have the fighter's safety at heart, but at the same time, you can run into a situation where you don't ever work again because you ruined the heavyweight championship on the biggest card ever.
Right, and I agree with that. Like, it seems like it's okay. Junior's young enough. He hasn't sustained a shitload of damage at this point in his career. But after these 2 fights he's had with Cain Velasquez, you do have to wonder, are those the type of beatings that change a guy forever? Because those were pretty significant. And I saw the press conference, and Cain Velasquez did not look good either after that fight. It's just, I think the damage he took was so few and far between throughout the fight that it wasn't as dramatic. But afterwards, he was gnarled up as well. That was a tough, grueling fight. And Cain did take some big shots from Junior. I rarely do this, but I was curious, so I pulled up the fight metric stats from this. And it's pretty, if you look at the fight totals, significant strikes, Cain Velasquez landed 123 significant strikes against Dos Santos' 46. He landed 61% of his fight. Total strikes, 274 to 62. Cain only landed 2 of 13 takedowns, which is kind of surprising. And he attempted 1 submission, which I don't even remember him. It says he attempted a submission. I don't remember this.
I think he did. He might have grabbed a guillotine, if I'm remembering right. Yeah,
but Dos Santos had the 1 attempt. But that's a shellacking that you don't usually see. Especially in a 5-round heavyweight fight. Holy shit! That was really, really a one-sided affair. And you're right, Junior. I don't know what he thought his strategy was when he was up against the cage. He was obviously pacing himself because he thought he'd be there a lot. And those elbows, that was definitely a strategy too. Every time he got space, he was throwing the left elbow. But the strategy should have been, how do I get off this cage and keep Cain Velasquez from putting me on this cage? Because he's pinned there. Cain Velasquez does not stop. He does not slow down, and he defended that title, and he put a stamp on it. Cain Velasquez is the best heavyweight. And at this point in the sport, it's really easy to whoever becomes the UFC champion and defends it to say, hey, he might be the greatest champion of this division of all time.
Yeah, that's true.
The sport has evolved to the point where I think it's hard to argue that how would Fedor Emelianenko do against Cain Velasquez, because judging by what we're seeing, I think Cain would have a game plan and would smother him and would beat him.
Yeah, I mean,
now,
you never know until you see it, but, who knows? But, yeah, I mean, all indications would lead you to believe that.
Right. And, whatever. Cain Velasquez, he's not always the most pleasing of fighters because he does use a very, smothering style. He's positioned before, finish kind of guy. But, hey, it's the heavyweight division, and this guy can fight 5 rounds the same as the first round, and that is a very impressive thing. Moving down, Daniel Cormier, Roy Nelson, again, a very one-sided affair. I saw after the fight Roy Nelson complained that Daniel Cormier just wasn't engaging him. And I don't know what fight Roy Nelson was watching because, yeah, he did evade you, Roy. He did back up when you came forward. He also, according to Fight Metric, landed 74 significant strikes to Roy Nelson's 17 significant strikes, and an 83 total to 26 total from Nelson. Hit 3 of 5 takedowns throughout the fight, 3 for 3 in the first round when Nelson was as fresh as he can get. Roy Nelson's wrestling defense looked pretty good against an Olympic wrestler, I have to say. But Roy Nelson showed that he doesn't have a lot of dimension to what he does. And Daniel Cormier, by the end of the fight, you're probably not knocking out Roy Nelson. Everybody understands this. You can pour everything you have at him, and you can get hit too if you want to. Or you can throw a bunch of weird jumping switch kicks and all kinds of crazy stuff and spinning moves and show people that you're a portly little heavyweight who has got some serious athletic ability and showcase yourself before you move weight classes. Daniel Cormier chose to do the latter, and in my opinion, he embarrassed Roy Nelson.
Yeah, I mean, that fight, to me, I didn't see it going any other way. And, the problem with Roy Nelson, I think you guys talked about this, is he has another dimension to his game, and that's his jiu-jitsu on top. But the transition to getting there for him it's impossible. Like, it's a Frank Mir situation, and even worse for Roy because he's small for a heavyweight. His frame is small.
Yeah.
But, Cormier, to me, he just keeps showing, like, he's smart. Like, he's able to keep a clear head in there. He knew which way that he needed to be moving every time. Landed the front kick to the face on Roy Nelson, dude standing right in front of you. I thought, he did what you do to Roy Nelson when you really beat the shit out of Roy Nelson.
Yeah, and Dana White's criticisms, if anyone saw, or I can recap, he basically says the same thing, in my opinion exactly. Roy Nelson looks like a world beater when he's fighting guys below the top 10. But when you get him to, and Dana said top 5, I pretty much say top 10. You put Roy Nelson with guys in the top 10, and he doesn't look like he belongs there. He looks like he's a step behind, and guys are smart enough not to be caught by his right hand. And he has that knockout power into the third round, which is something that's really special about Roy. And his cardio, he always looks exhausted, but he fights the same when he's exhausted as he does when he has energy. He just showed that, like, if you're smart, you can evade Roy Nelson. Stipe Miocic showed it perfectly. He just circled around and didn't let Roy throw that right hand. Daniel Cormier was ducking that right hand, too. Cormier was showing severe athleticism, like sick shit. And I was happy to hear Cormier say that he's not gunning for John Jones. He's not going to keep campaigning. He said he's got some work to do. I've heard some, people were throwing out Gustafson's name, which I don't think is a good fight for Gustafson. Not to say he couldn't win it, but, like, Gustafson needs, like, a tune-up fight, in my opinion. He almost won the championship. I don't want to see him fighting for a title challenge immediately. If they're not giving him a rematch, then let him fight somebody lower down the rankings before he's fighting for a number one contendership again. And let Cormier, someone else said Phil Davis. Yeah, let him fight Phil Davis, or let him fight the winner of Chael Sonnen and Rashad Evans. Give him a big marquee name to fight because he'll school either of those guys. Him and Phil Davis would be an interesting fight because Phil Davis is good with his range and those kicks and all that. I think that Cormier would probably take that one as well. Gustafson's probably the most attractive fight that I could think of, really, if you want to see where Cormier stands. Who would you like to see Cormier fight in his first fight at lightweight or light heavyweight?
Like you said, honestly, I don't want to see Gustafson. I don't want to see the situation that they have a heavyweight, where the same guys potentially could just fight each other twice for the title within a year. Light heavyweight has enough depth that you should be able to put Cormier in there with a guy that people know, but it's going to be a showcase for Cormier. And, you could give him a real big name guy, I don't know. There's so many guys at 205. They should do what they did with Glover. Give him right. Ryan Bader or somebody. I don't know.
Sure.
It'll be a while before he fights too. That's another thing to consider.
Right. I think what's hard with Cormier is that when he came to the UFC, they gave him Frank Mir, who was on a losing streak.
Yep.
And that it didn't make a whole lot of sense. And if they can't, I don't think they can do the same thing at light heavyweight. People know who Cormier is now. But, if someone along the lines of like a Ryan Bader, because I like the idea of Ryan Bader, what about like a Thiago Silva?
There's a matchup right there, a winner, but, it's going to be a showcase for Cormier.
Right, because Thiago Silva at this point, I got to think that they're just about done with him, and that a loss is going to get him out.
He's got to be on the chopping block. He's got to be. Missing weight, just getting busted for steroids. He's broken about every rule you can.
Yeah. So we've got fight of the night, and it was a fantastic fight to watch. Gilbert Melendez against Diego Sanchez. I'm going to complain here for a second. I hate to complain about a fight that was so enjoyable, but way too much praise being given to Diego Sanchez in this fight, in my opinion. Diego Sanchez has an immense amount of heart. Joe Rogan keeps referring to the crazy. Yes, everything you say about him, I'll agree with. He's crazy. He has heart. He never stops coming forward. He's stronger in the third round than he is in the first round. He's dangerous all the way through the fight. He'll take 10 shots to deliver one. It's very, very fun to watch Diego Sanchez fight in fights like these. However, it was a one-sided affair. In this fight, Diego Sanchez essentially, I'm going to pull up the fight metric as I'm talking, But from what my perception as I'm watching, Diego Sanchez landed a handful of body kicks, a takedown, and dropped him really close to, might have been able to finish the fight with strikes, possibly, in the third round. Obviously, his best moment of the fight. But the stats are 96 to 42 significant strikes, 98 to 42 total strikes, which means every strike that Diego landed was a significant strike. That's interesting. Diego only landed 1 of 6 takedown attempts. Melendez landed his 1 takedown defense. There was only 1 knockdown, which is bullshit. It says Sanchez knocked down Melendez. Melendez also dropped Diego at the end of either the first or the second round when they were exchanging. He clipped Diego with a right hook, and Diego's, if I'm thinking correctly, Diego's right leg buckled underneath him, and he fell on his hands and face.
Yeah, he did. He got dropped.
Yeah, so that's a bullshit stat right there. I saw the fight. That's not accurate. But Diego Sanchez in the third round was still coming forward, and Melendez, when they planted their feet and just started bombing on each other, Diego has an advantage. He hit harder, and he took a shot better. But Melendez was smart enough not to do that the entire fight. The whole fight, they're praising this as the best fight we've ever seen. Joe Rogan said it, then Goldberg said it, and then Dana White says at the press conference. They've decided to label this the best fight they've ever seen. Now, okay, it was one of the most entertaining fights I've ever seen. Possibly the most entertaining fight I've ever seen. That doesn't make it the best fight I've ever seen. In order to be the best fight, it's got to be close. I got to not know who's winning and it just be dramatic. And it had moments of drama, but Gustafsson-Jones was a better fight. There are other fights that weren't as dramatic that are better fights. Okay, Matt Brown beating the living shit out of Pete Sell was exciting, but that didn't make it a good fight. That just made it Pete Sell getting his brain damaged. I mean, do you agree?
Yeah. I mean, I was that Jones Gustafsson would be just recently a fight that I would think is a better fight, and it was longer as well, more time for there to be like an outcome, a finish to come. I don't know. I would, to me, the better fights are, where, Dan Henderson Shogun, where, Dan Henderson just almost knocks the dude out, and then by the 5th round, Dan Henderson has no gas left. Like, I like the tug of war, that back and forth. To me, I would even say that Melendez, when they were planning, what it looked like to me was Melendez had the perfect boxing range, and Diego was just throwing really hard and eating a lot of punches and only really landed that one real hard shot in the whole fight. That's the way I perceived it. I just thought that Melendez was really tagging him up and just not letting him push him backwards like Martin Kampman did.
Right, and so it was not the best fight you've ever seen.
No, but I like you said, it was one of the most entertaining fights, and that's a sure way to a person who doesn't watch MMA, that fight would get them into MMA for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and I don't want to take away from what a good fight that I did feel like it was, but that's the type of guy I am. I'm critical, I enjoyed it. The things I love, I'm maybe more critical of the things I hate, because I just don't. I remember when I saw the most important fight in UFC history, Forrest Griffin, Stephan Bonner. At that point, I don't even, what was that, 2005? I don't even know when this was. It was a while ago now. So I remember when I was watching it, I'd already been watching mixed martial arts for 10 years at that point. And so when I saw that fight, I enjoyed the heart that the guys were showing, but I also was a little bit bored with it. I'm like, okay, we're not going to see a finish in this fight. These guys are tired of shit. Oh, that's cool. They're still fighting. Look at the heart in these guys. And I'm not a robot. It generated, energy in me to see it happen. But that fight was nothing. A better fight than that was Don Fry with the blonde Japanese dude, the hockey fight, just drilling each other in the face for 3.5 minutes.
Oh, yeah,
I
man.
mean, that was Stephen Bonner, Forrest Griffin, like on steroids. But I understand.
How about any
I don't
fight
care.
Don Fry's ever been in, man?
Yeah, you know what? Except the fights of Don Fry's that I really did not enjoy were his 2 fights against Mark Coleman, and the fight against Ken Shamrock has dramatic moments, but it's like you can watch it on fast forward. A lot of clinching against the ropes.
Yeah.
But hey, still very entertaining things. And if any of those fights that were just mentioned, anyone listening has not seen, you need to Google it. Google Don Fry face punching contest, or Google Don Fry for that matter, and you'll come up with enough stuff. Whether it's him getting knocked out by Dog the Bounty Hunter's son's boxing coach in a hotel lobby, or him, beating the hell out of Japanese pro wrestlers. Like, you're gonna find plenty of fun things to watch with Don Fry. We got about 5 minutes before we're hitting Quinn Mulhern here, so let's run down some of the other stuff. Gabriel Gonzaga still in a great resurgence, coming back from retirement. I want to, before I say anything else, I want to pull up exactly what it is. He was retired for, I think it was just a year. It was one of those types of retirements, and he came back. He had one fight I think it was in Brazil. He had a fight against Parker Porter, and then he came back in the UFC as a late replacement, and he's gone 4-1 in the UFC. His only loss to Travis Brown, who's in the top 10. I think it's time for Gabriel Gonzaga to get a top 10 opponent. An interesting stat that I saw, 16 wins for Gabriel Gonzaga, 7 losses. He's only been to a decision 1 time in his career.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty
impressive stuff. I didn't realize that.
And for a jiu-jitsu guy primarily, which he's showing a lot more of recently, which is really nice, 7 knockouts, 9 submissions. So go Gabriel Gonzaga. Let's see him fight somebody up in that, like against like a Stipe Miocic, or at least like someone like a Ben Rothwell, who's right below the top 10 would be nice. John Dodson gets the knockout of the night. I did not get to see this fight. I didn't have a pay-per-view on yet, but it sounded like it was pretty dramatic. Can you tell me, did you see this, what happened?
Yeah, John Dodson's one of the very few small dudes that is like super explosive, and it was a pretty good fight up until he just leapt in with that left hand, and I think that guy was coming forward with some shots too, so his forward motion into the punch, just laid him at face first. Yeah,
and it was, they said, 3rd fastest. Like, it was kept spitting out some stat, like 3rd fastest knockout in flyweight history, and I was just impressed. Like, I mean, lightweight or flyweight's not a division that you see knockouts that often.
No.
That's cool. John Dodson's solid. He's an annoying character, but he's a solid fighter. So kudos. I do want to point out the Tim Boesch CB Dalloway fight. That was a good fight. I couldn't believe how huge CB Dalloway looked standing in front of Tim Boesch.
Yeah, Tim Boesch is that's his thing at 185 is he's big.
And it was a great fight. Like, it really was. One thing I cannot stand is CB Dalloway was showboating so much, and it's like, you might be ahead a little in this fight, but not enough to be showboating the way that you are. Because there were several times that he's showboating, and you hear Aaron Simpson going, "Be smart, CB." And then as soon as Boesch would flinch, CB would, cover back up and retreat. So the showboating was a little out of control, but great submission attempts, great back and forth between the guys. Boesch did get the split decision. I can't argue with the decision. It could have gone either way, in my opinion. It was a great, great fight. Hector Lombard. Okay, is Hector Lombard going to be a force at 170? Did this show us that this is where he belongs, that he's a badass, all these things, or did it show us more that Nate Marquardt can't hang anymore?
Yeah, I'm starting to worry about Nate Marquardt, and it might just be the 170 cut, but, that's what, he lost 3 in a row, hasn't he?
I think it's 2 in a row. I think he's picked up a win in this past 4 fights. But, no, you're right, it is 2 in a row that he's lost, yeah, and I think that he's lost 3 out of his last 4 fights between Strikeforce and the UFC.
Yeah, see, I thought he lost his last fight in Strikeforce. He got leg kicked to death. And then I thought he came in on short notice against Ellenberger, got knocked out, and I thought this was his last fight since then.
You might be right. I'll pull it up right now and tell you you're right. He's on three in a row. And honestly, not looking that hot since 2010. I'm looking at, he had a great run, and then he lost to Chael Sonnen, beat Paul Harris, lost to Okami, beat Dan Miller. Then he had, I don't even remember who the fight was against that he had to slip up in the UFC and they cut him, but he went to Strikeforce. He took the belt, Tyron Woodley. He lost it to Tarek, and then he knocked out by Ellenberger and knocked out by Lombard. So you are right about that. Like this is a bad slide. Probably getting fired. I don't wish it upon him, but maybe it is a good time for him to go over to one of the other organizations and see where he fits in the world of MMA right now, because it does not seem like it's in the UFC at the moment. A quick throw out, because we do need to get over here to Quinn Mulhern, but Jessica Ai in a great fight, split decision over Sarah Kaufman. Not sure if I kind of had Kaufman ahead in that one, but another really close fight. KJ Nunes and Soteropoulos. Again, I thought that was a very close fight. Soteropoulos needs, if he works on his wrestling as hard as he worked on his striking and has that three-dimensional game, Soteropoulos can be a serious, serious threat. KJ Nunes just has great takedown defense, and he got hit a lot for being such a touted striker. Like either Soteropoulos has gotten a lot better than what I even anticipated, or KJ Nunes is getting sloppy. What's your opinion on that one?
To me, I've seen it seems like a steady decline in KJ Nunes being technical with his boxing, because by the third round, the dude's face is kind of cut up, and he's got his hands real low and is bobbing and weaving. And I mean, I remember seeing him bob and weave into head kicks, so the dude can just take a lot of damage. Yeah, and he took some shots directly to his chin as well. We do need to go to commercial here. We'll come back with Quinn Mulhern. We might have time to revisit some of these fights on the undercard to discuss a little bit more as the show goes on. But as of now, it is time for some advertisements.
This is Real Combat Media Radio. Check us out at realcombatmedia.com. While you're there, check out the Feed the Poor link on the bottom of every article, and you can send a donation if you're interested. That is, once again, on the bottom of every article as well as on the top of the website. If you are an MMA, boxing, or fitness business and interested in sponsoring our website or radio podcast, send us an email. Advertising at realcombatmedia.com. Once again, that is advertising at realcombatmedia.com. Make sure to check out the Real Combat Media MMA and boxing store at the top of the menu at realcombatmedia.com. We carry a collection of products. We have the Cardio Mask, which is excellent for all fighters, endurance athletes, and serious fitness enthusiasts. Once you are in the Real Combat Media store, click on the banner on that page. We also carry Alpha Brain. Alpha Brain is a great and natural product which activates your brain's neurotransmitters and helps you think more clearly, which improves brain function. You can also purchase the world's healthiest plant protein, which comes from hemp. There are many other products online on the online store, and click on the On It banner at the Real Combat Media store, and you can purchase Alpha Brain and other health products. Use the discount code Real Combat Media, and you will receive 10% off at the checkout store on the On It. That is ONNIT on the banner at Real Combat Media store. Buckle up. Here we go. Let's get this show started.
All right, we are back live, Real Combat Media MMA Radio. Isaac Lanford here, my younger brother Thor Lanford joining me on the show today as well, and we are now joined by UFC welterweight, about to become UFC lightweight, Quinn Mulhern. Quinn, how are you doing this evening?
Good. How are you guys?
Fantastic. Very, very good. So, Quinn, I think most appropriately, the first thing to ask you here is, you had, a successful career as a welterweight, going 18-3, and when I looked over, it's like mostly King of the Cage is where you started off, and then you had the Strikeforce run, come to the UFC, unfortunately drop the fight to Rick Story. And now correct me at any point where I'm wrong here. You were supposed to make a lightweight debut against Ryan Couture in August, but an injury removed you. Then you were set for November to take on Thiago Tavares, and an injury has forced you out of this fight as well. But the lightweight move is what's coming up. Is that all correct?
That is right, yeah. It was essentially the same injury that got me that knocked me out of the Tavares fight as well. I went, to the doctor, and my hand did not get cleared. It was a broken metacarpal, and it hadn't fused in the way that they liked, so they didn't clear me to fight, and I had to pull out of that one too.
Okay, so now when you first said it was the same injury, I was expecting it to be like something that you injured and then re-injured, but this was actually from the original injury. You weren't cleared to fight yet. So you were really you were optimistic taking a fight in November, just hoping that this hand was going to be ready to go then, weren't you?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think sometimes it was really, I mean, my agent actually said yes to the fight before we had medical clearance or anything. And, I think we were both kind of maybe a little over-eager, and we just wanted to jump back in there. And, hindsight being 20/20, we realized, it was too soon. But, that's just what happened.
Was your training, this whole time, has your training been affected by this injury?
Oh, yeah. So I guess I got injured in, I think, the first or second week of July, I believe. And basically I was in a cast for 5 weeks. And then after that, my strength was not really back for another, 4 weeks, after that point. But, I was starting to punch again. I was starting to actually spar. Right now I'm back to basically 100%. I mean, there's no real 100%, but I'm feeling good right now. But yeah, it definitely knocked me out for a while.
Yeah, right on. So do you have a projected time on the table now? Are you talking about the next fight, or are you going to wait for clearance before you go that far now?
No, well, I was actually just cleared just this last week, the end of last week. So officially, doctor's signature and everything, it's all good. So, I've been talking to Monty, my agent, and we're hoping something in January. There's no guarantees. It's hard when you're in a position like mine where you're just starting to kind of climb up the totem pole, and there's a sense that I'm a little bit on the back burner in terms of them wanting to choose me for a fight. But I'm keeping my fingers crossed, hoping it's not going to be too long from now.
Sure. But, I mean, you say, maybe now on the back burner, but since you've made the crossover to the UFC, I mean, the opponents that you've been lined up with, although only one has panned out, but Rick Story, Ryan Couture, Thiago Tavares, they're definitely giving you guys with recognizable names, so I wouldn't say you're too far on the back burner.
No, yeah, I hope not. I mean, I just, obviously the injury wasn't something that was under my control, but nonetheless I felt responsible all the same, and I think that feeling is just it's a feeling of not being fully in control is just kind of hard, and I think sometimes that makes me sort of believe well, maybe now they're kind of pissed off, or but that's all conjecture, Hopefully,
right.
Hopefully it's not like that. I know it's just business, but I'm just trying to do everything in good faith at this point, and hope that they want to call me up again.
Now, when you said you referred to Monty, is that Monty Cox?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, that's why you're getting good names. You got a pit bull fighting for you in there, trying to get you some matches.
I do. Yeah, that's true.
So I guess appropriate to ask you about this move to lightweight. Is this something that you've been playing around with for a while, and you were just kind of waiting until maybe you took a stutter step in welterweight, or was it something that happened in the Rick Story fight? Was he just so much stronger and bigger than what you were used to, or what led you to this decision?
Yeah, I guess it was a bit of both. I think I've been considering it basically my entire career, It's been something my coach, my original coach back in Santa Fe, has always thought would be a good move for me. It's something where when I was not in the UFC yet and I was looking towards it, and I was looking at the pantheon of fighters in welterweight versus lightweight, I always felt like maybe lightweight was a better fit, but over time it just never materialized, I think I was just never forced into it. And so, it's sort of like a lifestyle change. You have to eat so differently all the time that I just sort of never wanted to do it. And I was having success at welterweight, so I just stayed there. But yeah, I think with this last loss, it was just kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. It was just the kind of like the last thing I needed, the last little push to say finally, like, okay, now I need to actually do this.
Sure. And you say somebody you thought your entire career, but you're also 6'3". Is that stat correct?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so you're a tall lightweight. I know that's getting more and more common to see guys of your stature at lightweight, but I can't imagine that it's the easiest cut no matter how you may be framed when you're 6'3".
Yeah, it's not, I mean, you know, ideally if I'm like an ideal 160-pounder, you know, if there was a weight class at like 161 or 2, that would be perfect for me. But, you know, it's doable, and it's just the kind of thing that it kind of makes or breaks you as a fighter at this point. Everybody's cutting so much weight. There's only maybe a couple of guys I can even think of that don't cut a lot, you know, so it's just one of the skill sets that you have to have now. And, you know, I did a practice cut actually a while back, and I made the weight, so I can do it. It's not fun, obviously, but it's doable. It's doable.
Yeah, so if you got your wish in January, you get a fight, are you looking at any particular cards that they have planned right now? Is there anyone who, like, are you guys flipping through the roster trying to see guys that might be available, any of that sort of thing? Or are you just putting it on the table for the UFC and trying to at 155, is it Sean Shelby or is it Joe Silva doing 155 matchmaking?
It's been Silva.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's changing. I don't know if that's changing soon. I heard some rumor, but at least recently it's been Silva.
Okay. But are you just leaving it in their hands, let Monty and him figure out who it's going to be, or is there anybody who you think you match up with well that you'd like to have?
Yeah, you know, I'm just leaving it in their hands at this point. You know, I feel like I'm not in position to, like, ask for a specific person. I really liked the Ryan Couture fight for myself. Obviously, he's not in the UFC anymore, but you know, I think there's a lot of guys that I feel like make good matches with me, but you know, that's just not something I really think about. I like to just let the matchmakers do their work and wait for the opponent to come along the line.
Sure. Thor, you have anything you want to ask Quinn while we have him here? Are we there, Thor? Maybe. Yeah. Sorry, Thor. Could you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Do you have anything you want to ask Quinn?
I just wanted to ask real fast. You know, after a long layoff, you know, and you're looking to cut, you know, weight for the first time, go down to lightweight. Is there like a different timetable that you start your training camp? Are you going to start earlier or do anything different, or how do you approach that?
Yeah, I think the thing is I just need a guaranteed like 6 weeks. There's no way I can do it in less time than that. 8 to 10 weeks is best. So yeah, it's a little longer. I need a little longer than I used to need. But I've been keeping my weight down. So I'm like walking around about 180. I used to walk around about 187, 190, cutting to welterweight. So I walk around a little lighter. My nutrition is, you know, way more under control than it ever was in the past, so that helps a lot too. But yeah, I basically just need a little more time to do the whole thing. When I did my practice cut, I actually did it in 3 weeks, just under 3 weeks. So, you know, it was a lot of pressure, like a lot of, you know, pain and damage to my body essentially. So I don't want to do it in 3 weeks ever again. You know, I would have to be at least 6.
Right on.
You got anything else there, Thor?
No, just, you know, want to wish you luck and, you know, hope you can stay healthy and, you know, love to see how you do at lightweight.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
And while we're talking here, Quinn, I've been kind of, just perusing, as I have for the past week or so, looking at your record up and down. And for, still being an up-and-comer in the UFC and maybe not one of the more prominent names, like, you still have fought some really stiff competition on the way through, and notable names. Like, I'm just kind of cruising, and I see people like Goyman, Brennan, Jason High, Rick Story. Would you say, because obviously the fight with Rick Story was maybe the most unsuccessful, I guess, I don't know a better term to put it there, that you had. Is Rick Story, has that been the roughest fight for you?
The roughest fight, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, in some ways, yeah. I mean, I guess, there's a million ways to break these things down in your head. I think, there's a sort of a statistical problem. Like, I'm just a smaller welterweight in general, and it's just like rolling the dice on that. It's just not too good at welterweight, right? But with Rick Story, I mean, he's a strong guy. He's like very powerful, obviously. I don't think it's like out of the realm of possibility for me to beat an opponent like that. Obviously, I didn't do it, but it's still in my head that I can beat that kind of competition. I'm just I'm wanting to put like a statistical advantage, in my favor, so that I don't have to, fight these guys who are cutting from 205. They're just cutting a lot of weight, and they're very, just physically bigger people than me. In some ways, it wasn't the roughest fight. It was fast. I got hit in a way where it was just I get hit and went basically blind on one side, and it was very disorienting punch. I'd never been punched that way before. It was like a very weird punch, and the where it landed anyway. And so, and it was hard enough that I just couldn't recover from it. But I'd say the fight against Jason High was way worse for me because it was just so frustrating. Fight against a wrestler like that who just kind of grinds it out and never did that much damage, but definitely won the fight. That's a harder fight, to lose than catching a bad punch. The two are different, very different in terms of how you react.
Now, you mentioned with Rick Story just about his size and power. When you were presented with that fight, because you seem like you're a level-headed guy and not overly macho or anything. Did you took that all into consideration, and were you just I'm not really in a position to reject the first fight they offer me in the UFC, or did you just really think that technically you'd be able to catch him?
You have to believe every fight that you take. You have to believe that you can win. I mean, I would never take a fight that it was just I better take this or else I'm going to get cut. I mean, that's just a bad mentality, and
sure.
It's going to get you. It's going to get you cut anyway. You know what I'm saying? Where if you really don't believe that you can beat the person. So, yeah, I was in a position where I felt I needed to kind of. It wasn't an ideal opponent. It wasn't like a pushover by any means. But I also felt at the time that I could beat him, when I looked at it. And I would never take a fight that was just unwinnable or I felt was unwinnable. I don't think there's any fight that's absolutely unwinnable. But your belief in that definitely affects things. So I at the time I tried to keep the I don't know what you call it, the political element out of it and just think about the fight itself. And I believed I could beat him.
Cool. I asked a lot of the guys that we talked to that came over from Strikeforce because, Strikeforce not as prominent as the UFC to a lot of people that watch the UFC, but for a lot of us that were following both, we knew the quality that Strikeforce had in the roster. When you came over, did you feel any of that pressure, that you were carrying the Strikeforce banner into the UFC, or was it just kind of business as usual for you?
In some ways it was business as usual. It was definitely a bigger show. But just in terms of quantity, not in terms of quality. I'd already been doing Strikeforce, so I knew a lot of the people who were involved, a lot of the handlers, photographers, etc., and kind of the system, how Zuffa does things is pretty consistent, which is nice. So, the difference between Strikeforce and the UFC was way smaller than the difference between King of the Cage and Strikeforce. Because when that change happened, it was like it was like a culture shock, you know. It was so different how everything was done. But that was a lot harder.
Sure. And while we got you here, and maybe even more appropriately since my co-host David Hollywood Hewlett isn't here, I'm going to ask you about you had a fight. You beat David by decision in Strikeforce. I just want to ask you about the fight with David Hewlett.
Oh, just about the fight itself?
Yeah, I want to hear you talk about fighting David, because I get to hear David tell me about fighting everyone he's ever fought.
Yeah, that was a good fight for me in some ways. I because it pushed me to the end of the fight. You know, fights that I win by submission or something. Sometimes they're not the same kind of physical tests. You know, what happened for me is I think David was trying to guillotine me, and so when I would shoot, it was almost like he accepted the takedown a little bit, and that worked to my advantage, and I got out of the guillotines. And so that happened in the first round, and then I made this like kind of terrible mistake where I was on his back, and I decided to kind of jump forward, and instead I ended up on my back, of course. It's a thing I literally tell every student of mine not to do, and I did it, you know. And so I ended up on my back, and I won that round, but it was like, oh, I could have won there, you know, and because I didn't, you know, the fight stretched all 3 rounds, and I think in the second, he caught me in another guillotine where that time I was like pretty deep, and I ended up on the bottom for a while, and you know, like I was in deep water, but recovered in the 3rd round, and I think just like did a better job on the feet. But that was it. You know, it was a cool fight for me because I got to sort of see myself in every position. Like I was on top, dominant on top. I was like on the bottom, getting my ass kicked. And I was in the stand-up position, so like I got to do everything, and you know, I was just happy I won.
Yeah, and you know, I've been trying my damnedest to find a video of this fight, and I have been unable to find it at this point, which is pretty upsetting because it was on the Challenger Series, and I know that they had the cameras running, but I have yet to find the video, and that's been disappointing for me. I
think you're going to have to get a friend in the UFC. Send you because if you want to you would ask for tape of me, and they would have that fight on their CD. You know, in fact, I think I have a copy. We'll figure it out. Twitter me, maybe I can send you a copy. Yeah, that's great, fantastic. Before we let you go here, Quinn, obviously, you know, if you want to plug your Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff, and if you have anything else going on that you want to make sure people know about, now would be the time. Have at it. All right, plugs. Twitter is Quinn MMA. That's QUINN MMA, and my website is quinnmulhern.com.
Fantastic. Well, Quinn, thank you very much for coming on to talk. Obviously, it's a little frustrating. You don't have the fight that you had planned coming up, but when you get scheduled and it is announced, I'm going to be hitting you up again to come on and talk specifically about your next opponent.
That would be great. I'd love it, man.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Quinn, and have a good night, man. Good luck with you're cleared now, so no more recovery. Good luck with training and finding an opponent.
All right. Thanks, Isaac, and thank you, Thor. Have a good one, guys.
Good night.
Bye.
All right. Yeah, good talk. Quinn's a nice guy. Like, it's unfortunate, you know, we were supposed to have the interview last week, and whatever happened there, some wires got crossed, miscommunication. Sometimes time zones get in the way of some things, miscommunications. But we got it leveled out now. And one thing that's kind of frustrating, like, he texted me today to make sure that I knew that the Tavares fight was canceled, because some of the top news sites are still listing his fight with Thiago Tavares in November. They haven't taken it off yet. Even I just saw SureDog when I was looking at his record had it up there. So that's a little confusing because they've already – I don't remember who's replacing him, but the replacement's already in place. It's only a few weeks away, but the media sources are a little behind on this one. You still with me here, Thor?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, cool. You never know. Sometimes we drop out of these calls a little bit, and I don't know it until I throw over to talk to somebody. But yeah, Quinn seems like a good guy, level-headed, you know. And I think he understood I wasn't trying to, you know, give it to him in the wrong way when I say that, like, obviously you take a fight that you think you're going to win. I just meant it as, some of these guys, they're just meat-headed and they just are like, put him in front of me, I'll fight him, I can beat everybody. And he struck me as the type of guy that, and he said it like, he knew that Rick Story was an uphill battle for him. That was a tough fight for him. And, sometimes, obviously, his manager, Monty Cox, believed in him to take it too. It would have been a big name win for him coming into the UFC and all that sort of thing. Maybe in hindsight, when they came over to the UFC, would have been the time to drop to lightweight right from the get-go. But, hey, he's going to be there now, and it can be a fresh start for him, I don't think that losing to Rick Story in the biggest fight that you've had so far in your career is really that bad of a thing, and we'll see how he hangs at lightweight and if he can carve out a nice little niche for himself in the UFC.
Yeah, that just hearing him talk, it definitely struck me as a dude. He's a thinker. He's not a fighter who is reckless. Maybe I wouldn't even say meathead. Some of them are just slightly reckless. Obviously he's got a smart manager, but like you said, it's like the pros outweigh the cons if you lose to Rick Story at 170 in your first fight in the UFC.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, it's not a bad – like, you'd be way worse off. Like, if they present you with Rick Story, I can see taking that fight before – and maybe his name pops into my mind because he's Rick Story's next opponent, but like Brian Ebersol. Because Brian Ebersol just as easily is going to beat you, but not nearly as many people know who Brian Ebersol is. It's not as good of a loss as a Rick Story could be. And when a guy gets knocked out in the first round, like for me anyway, and like you tell me if you feel the same way, but when a guy knocks somebody out in the first round, like a Luis Santos that we were talking about, I'm like, holy cow, that guy's a killer. But when someone gets knocked out in the first round, I don't really ever take anything away from that guy. It's usually more of a credit to his opponent than a knock against him.
Yeah, or just a really close fight that ends with one spectacular, strike, like Anderson Silva, Chris Weidman is a perfect example,
Right.
I don't think, because you could watch the second Lyoto Machida Shogun fight and have the complete wrong idea who is the better striker. Definitely the more technical guy, I believe, is Lyoto. Yeah,
I agree. I agree with that. The one fight that comes to my mind where my opinion of the first-round knockout didn't hold up, and I said it on air, and David called me out as I was defending Vinny Magalhães in his knockout to Anthony Perosh, and David's just kind of like, but dude, he got knocked out in the first round by Anthony Perosh. Okay, all right, I get what you're saying. That's not like Rick Story or Chris Lieben or somebody leveling you in the first round. That is a not as refined striker is how I'll put that, with Anthony Perosh clipping you on the chin and taking. But hey, that's what happens when you are swinging fists at each other's faces for a living. Sometimes that's bound to happen, and maybe that is as much of a knock against Magalhães, more so even than it's a credit to Perosh in that fight. Because I don't think anybody walked away from that fight going, "Oh, damn, Anthony Perosh's hands have gotten awesome."
Right.
Just kind of Vinny Magalhães hasn't gotten any better, I think, was more the takeaway in that particular situation. We got a couple of minutes here before we're calling in Brady Hovermale, so we can revisit this 166 card just a little bit and talk about the two that we didn't get to as much. Jessica Eye, Sarah Kaufman, super close fight. Did you have Eye winning that fight?
No. I had Sarah Kaufman. I had her winning 2 rounds, and I'm trying to remember. I'm just going to guess by the way that they fought that maybe I didn't have Sarah winning the first round. But it just seemed to me like she was moving forward more, and especially the way most of the time the judges score it, the person that's evading and moving backward oftentimes loses the round.
Yeah, it really was seemed to be a matchup of speed versus power. And by the third round, Kaufman was really hurting Jessica Eye, like hurting her pretty badly. She definitely took that round, and it was a super close fight. And I guess, usually I agree with that, like, the way Kaufman was plodding forward, it wasn't the same as like Diego Sanchez plodding forward. She wasn't just getting hit and walking forward and winging punches. She was getting in and landing shots. I was landing shots too. I have to think that Kaufman's were carrying more damage on what she did land. And, you know, while we're talking about it, why not pull up the fight metric on this one and see how it looks compared to each other, because this is one I actually did not look at earlier. Okay, according to, it's not loading at the moment. Hang on here. I can look at just the basics because the other page isn't landing, but significant strikes is what's just listed on the main page, and Sarah Kaufman outlanded Jessica Ai 87-65 throughout the fight. And if I could open this up, we can look at it round by round and see if that adds up, if it was maybe, yeah, here we go. Round 3, Kaufman outlanded her, we'll go total strikes over the, like I usually prefer total strikes anyway, 63-30. In the third round, outlanded her 38-33 in the second round, and they were dead even at 30-30 in the first round. There were no takedown attempts. There were no submission attempts. So if you're telling me, according to this, significant strikes, I was ahead by 2 in round 1 and behind 17-26 in round 2, behind 23-38 in round 3. According to Fight Metric, Sarah Kaufman obviously won this fight.
Yeah, I would agree. I thought she won. I was a little bit surprised, but with the judging in MMA, you can only be so surprised anymore.
Yeah, and maybe she looked good to the judges. I mean, she was evading well. She was obviously faster. You know, maybe even landed more combinations. That might have had something to do with it. When she was landing, it was coming in combinations, and it was looking more impressive. That's a possibility. But a really good fight. It's one of those where shouldn't take anything too much away from Sarah Kaufman. She's a veteran. She's a good staple for the women's bantamweight division. I'm sure she'll stick around either way. And a good win for Jessica Ai to go forward and prove herself a little bit more. We are at this time right now. We go one more time to the commercial, and then we're going to come back on the other side with Brady the Alpha Male Hovermale.
This is Real Combat Media Radio. Check us out at realcombatmedia.com. While you're there, check out the Feed the Poor link on the bottom of every article, and you can send a donation if you're interested. That is, once again, on the bottom of every article as well as on the top of the website. If you are an MMA, boxing, or fitness business and interested in sponsoring our website or radio podcast, send us an email. Advertising at realcombatmedia.com. Once again, that is advertising at realcombatmedia.com. Make sure to check out the Real Combat Media MMA and boxing store at the top of the menu at realcombatmedia.com. We carry a collection of products. We have the Cardio Mask, which is excellent for all fighters, endurance athletes, and serious fitness enthusiasts. Once you are in the Real Combat Media store, click on the banner on that page. We also carry Alpha Brain. Alpha Brain is a great and natural product which activates your brain's neurotransmitters and helps you think more clearly, which improves brain function. You can also purchase the world's healthiest plant protein, which comes from hemp. There are many other products online on the online store, and click on the On It banner at the Real Combat Media store, and you can purchase Alpha Brain and other health products. Use the discount code Real Combat Media, and you will receive 10% off at the checkout store on the On It. That is ONNIT on the banner at Real Combat Media store. Buckle up. Here we go. Let's get this show started.
All right, we are back at Real Combat Media MMA Radio. Isaac Lampert here. Thor Lampert's been on the show with me. We are now joined by Mike Wurst out of Memphis. Mike, how you doing?
Doing good, sir.
And we are also now joined by our second interview, Indiana lightweight prospect Brady the Alpha Male Hovermale. Brady, how are you doing this evening?
Howdy, guys. I am great. I'm glad to be on.
Yeah, we are glad to have you. I'll run down just like the basic information here just so we can get that out of the way right off the bat. Brady is 8-3 as a professional, only been to the decision 2 times. He is the current Combat Zone lightweight champion, and he is about to be fighting in St. Louis November 1st for MMA Sport Federation in the main event against Jimmy Donahue, who is 6-3. Brady, what can you tell us about your opponent, Jimmy Donahue? What do you know about this guy?
Just outside of the usual research you do, just watching their fights. He's a tall guy. Seems to favor grappling a bit. Yeah, I don't concentrate too much on my opponent. Mostly just worried about what I'm going to do.
And typically, what you do is get knockouts pretty quickly in fights. Most of your fights have been by the knockout. And I'll just ask, I guess, I'll start it with a question. What is your base when you got into mixed martial arts? Were you a traditional martial artist, high school wrestling? What was it that got you into this?
Yeah, it was high school wrestling because I wrestled since I was 6 years old and just fell in love with the competition of that, and then just got into backyard boxing and stuff like that before I moved to Florida. Took some actual boxing classes there, and then in high school got hooked up with Mr. James Porter and went from there.
Yeah, right on. And I'm looking at, with Jimmy Donahue, the research that I was doing for it, the guy, all the wins that he has he has 1 KO but 5 submissions, and most of them
they're all very fast. They're all pretty early.
Yeah, and they looks to be, most of them are off of his back as well, which always makes it a little bit of a tricky opponent that can be that effective off of his back. But I will point out on that subject that if people were to YouTube your name, you are also quite effective off your back in a very different way. I know I heard about it, and I saw on Inside MMA the highlight, you scoring the knockout. I'm losing the name of who your opponent was in this fight, but you scored a one-punch knockout from your back and your guard. Tell us, everybody, about that fight.
Yeah, that was a tough dude. I was pretty ready to go for that fight because it was short notice, and I know that dude's a tough guy. I scored early with a front kick to the face, almost like a teep, and I think he just never recovered after that. Yeah, it's a pretty good highlight, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to hear Boss Rutan talk about your fight on Inside MMA because of it.
That's always great. Yeah.
And was that I'm looking it up now, was that the Kinzer fight? Was that the one that was?
Yes.
All right, so, yeah, Hovermale against Josh Kinzer, if anybody wants to pull that up. That's a pretty good one. And, I mean, I'm looking at, though, when I was putting together, sending out the guys, the little pack for the show to get familiar with the fights, and you have no shortage of dramatic knockouts on these either, which is always a fun thing. And you're now, how many fights have you had at lightweight now?
At lightweight, I'm not sure. I've been mostly at featherweight, but now I am starting to put on a little bit of weight, and it was already hard to get to featherweight, so I decided to go up to lightweight, and I feel pretty good there. I feel like this is a good weight class for me right now.
Yeah, so the cut. Now, have you added mass as well, or are you walking around the same size that you were going to featherweight now to be a lightweight?
Yeah, I've put on a few pounds. I mean, at this size, even just 2 or 3 pounds can be a big deal if it's not water but actual mass. And so I just feel like as I'm getting older, I'm putting on a little bit more adult weight and just feels healthier at 55.
Yeah, and you say getting older, and that is notable to point out that you already – is the record – because when you look at different places sometimes the records aren't the same. Are you 7-3 or is it 8-3?
8-3.
Okay, that's what I thought.
I haven't found any
pro. Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, I haven't found anything that says 7-3 unless they had unincluded my last fight or hadn't got it updated yet.
Yeah, that might be. Sherdog is what I'm looking at right now, and I gotta say, Sherdog, the Fight Finder was groundbreaking, all those sorts of things. But the Underground really has a better record keeping at this point because Sherdog doesn't always stay on top of things. And I think you're exactly right; they haven't updated since January of 2013 here on your fight. But all I was getting at when I asked is, you are 8-3, and you're only 22 years old, so you got a long career going, and at the rate that it's going, I think you're looking pretty solid because the losses that you have are, notable opponents. There's some, substantial competition to pick up a couple of losses earlier in your career. So it is looking good. Can you tell me how the fight came together in St. Louis? Because I know at this stage in your career, sometimes it's hard to get out of the home state and get things lined up. How did the fight for MMA Sport Federation come together?
Well, I got to give a shout out to Bill Kilgore. He is the one who hooked me up. I'm not sure I'm not sure who got a hold of him, but he was the one who offered me. He got me in touch with the fight. And originally I was slated to fight a different opponent, but I suppose he was like sick or something. So Jimmy Donahue.
All right, so he was sick, and it's still 2 weeks from the fight, but he just wasn't able to fight you. Maybe it disrupted training camp. I'm not going to judge the guy. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't want to say anything because you never know. You never know what people are going through, but it's fine. I'll just take on the new name.
Sure, and you get the main event, so not a bad way to go.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that too.
Yeah, that's a good opportunity. I'm gonna pass over just in case these other guys have some things I want to ask you. Mike, do you want to ask Brady anything while we have him on the line?
Yeah, I was curious, Brady. When I was looking at your profile, I noticed it looks like you had three fights that you had an originally scheduled opponent, and then your opponent got replaced or something along those lines. How does that affect your? I know you said it doesn't really affect. You don't worry about your opponent too much, but how does that affect your mindset? Like you're ready to fight, and then like 2 weeks before they come to you, oh, your opponent's back out, we're trying to find you another one. How does that affect your mindset and your plans for your fight?
Yeah, I guess I just assume that just part of it. I mean, I assume that everyone has to deal with that pretty regularly. I mean, this is a sport where we're basically training to hurt each other, so in the process, sometimes you get hurt, so...
How easy or how difficult
is with the territory.
Yeah, how easy or how difficult is it for you to be like if you were if it was on the flip side, if somebody came to you 2 weeks before a fight and said, hey, we want you to step in and fight this guy, and you were to agree to it, how do you handle that?
Yeah, I've had a few. Actually, several of my fights have been pretty short notice. It doesn't bother me too much because I'm always training. I'm always staying in shape because I think you lose something if you let yourself get out of shape. So I try to always stay on top of it and always ready.
Yeah, because it seems like some guys tend to take some time off after their fights, you know, and
yeah,
maybe
I'm 22
like a
years old. I don't have the luxury.
Yeah. So, all right, cool. Thanks.
And Thor, I offer you to talk to Brady. You guys know each other very well, so I don't know how many questions you have for him here, but if you have any, go for it.
Yeah, you know, maybe just get you to talk about a little bit, maybe some different things you're working on for this training camp, if it's opponent specific or just something that's kind of sticking to you, like a technique that you are trying to get down. You know, is there anything different going on in this training camp?
This specifically, not a ton. I mean, I'm just trying to get a good game plan together. Obviously, this guy's really comfortable with the submission, so we don't want to spend a bunch of time trading jiu-jitsu with the guy, but mainly just staying ready everywhere. You always got to have you got to cross all your T's and dot all your I's. You got to be ready everywhere.
Yeah, also, I guess I should point out, too, that the knockout that you guys are talking about, you know, that Brady took that fight on short notice, and that was at 55. You know, and that was before your permanent move, too, to 55. You just kind of jumped in there and,
yeah,
you know,
that gave me confidence that I'd be able to handle lightweight.
Right on, yeah.
I actually had to watch that fight twice because the first time I watched it, I was like, what happened? And I rewound it, and I was like, oh, that happened. Okay, yeah, now I get it.
Yeah, I think you were recording it the first time you watched it, too, so...
Oh yeah, Thor was the one. What I like, and it's the comment Boss Root made too, is that you look at your hands afterwards too, like, huh, really? I can do that for my back issues.
Actually,
all right,
I think I was just wiping the blood off of myself. Actually,
I like it my way better. I like the discovery of the superpower moment or whatever.
Yeah, it's not a bad way to look at it.
Hey, Brady, that is one thing though. I'm sorry, what was that?
I was going to ask Brady another question, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're fine. Go ahead.
What are your ultimate plans, Brady? Are you wanting to take a step like to maybe Bellator, go to UFC? You know, what's your ultimate goal?
That's long term. That's the goal. Get into one of the bigger organizations. My aim is to be the best in the world. That's what I'm training to do. That's what I want to be. And so I'm aware that right now we're just we're just getting started. There's a long road ahead.
Well, you definitely started off on the right path, I can tell you that.
I appreciate it, man.
So, Brady, before we let you out of here, do you want to plug some things? Are you the social media type of guy? You want people following you on Twitter and all that sort of stuff?
Right. On Twitter, it's just my name, at Brady Hovermale, and on Twitter, if you type my name in, you'll find me there too, / Brady Alphamale. No real sponsors to shout out to, unfortunately. I'm actually trying to locate some sponsors just to help me, get to different training camps, because I've been looking at different camps, and it's pretty pricey to get somewhere just to stay for a week. So always looking for that.
For sure.
I got to give a shout out to Bill Kilgore and James Porter for helping me out, and of course for Lanford as well.
Right on.
Thank you, sir.
And so that is something that's unique about where you're at in your career, is that I don't think people realize, there isn't a lot of money in this. It's like anything. When you're starting off, you really got to pull. So, maybe you're on the air right now. If there are any sponsors out there that want to get behind a promising lightweight prospect with some dynamite in his hands, Brady Hovermale is looking for sponsors. Brady, we thank you for coming on. Good luck on the first in St. Louis. We definitely want to check back in with you after this fight and when you figure out what you got going on next, and just follow along the career. If you'll have us, we'd love to have you back on sometime.
Hey, man, I'd love to do it. I appreciate it a lot. You guys are awesome.
All right, Brady, thank you very much, and have a good night,
Thanks,
man.
Brady.
Hey, you guys. See ya. Talk to you soon.
Later. Yeah, all right. Yeah, Brady it is one of those things you can't teach like that. The power in the hands is a serious thing with him, especially at the lower weight classes. Like a lot of knockouts on his resume already. And once again, a knockout from his back and his guard that you don't see too often anywhere, but he pulled it off very early in his career on the local scene. Makes him a definite standout. And I apologize, Thor, that got to be kind of an odd interview for you. You have to sit in here and interview a guy that you train with all the time, but you handled it quite nicely and elegantly.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah. That is one thing, though. I really hope that sponsors will jump on these guys. Brady and James. Those are two guys that are just steals right now for sponsors.
Sure. And it's just like anything, It's like when you're in the early stages of anything like this, and David and I have talked about this a lot because there are always odd parallels. Like for me, coming from the world of comedy, and then Thor and I, our older brother. He does comedy as well, but he also does managing for pro wrestling, and he works on a horror hosting show as well. And then talking to David, a fighter, and it's weird how the parallels with all of these things, because bottom line, fighting is a sport, but it's still entertainment. And when you're at these levels, there's no money in it. You're doing it because you love it and you would like the prospect of it paying eventually. But the fact of the matter is, for these fighters, if you're not fighting on these big cards, on these big organizations, it's not a living. The amount of money you have to pay out to get to do what you're doing and get the paycheck doesn't equal a living, especially if you have a family or something like that. That's why you see early retirement so much. And if you don't have a good day job, not everyone can be Shane Carwin, and they can't be, working an engineering job and fighting because it's fun or whatever. You see a lot of policemen, a lot of firemen that get to pull this off on the mid-level circuit because they have good jobs. But if you don't, you're setting up a pretty thin existence for yourself if you're only getting by on the fighting money. And sponsors are what make the difference there. And if you got promise, hopefully some local businesses will step in, and fight gear companies and that sort of thing. Lord knows Tap Out's been an angel for a lot of young fighters. So hopefully we see more of it. And we like to interview the prospects on this show as well as the guys fighting on the bigger cards, because it does start at there. If you can find the guys there and follow them through, it's something special if you're a really big fan of the sport. And if we can do anything with bringing an audience to some of these guys, then that's a win for us, for sure. I want to talk about the fights we have coming up this weekend for sure. We'll get in our last commercial break, and we're going to come back on the other side, talk Bellator, talk World Series of Fighting, and, of course, talk UFC Munoz against Machida. So we will be back in a minute and 30 seconds.
This is Real Combat Media Radio. Check us out at realcombatmedia.com. While you're there, check out Check out the Feed the Poor link on the bottom of every article, and you can send a donation if you're interested. That is, once again, on the bottom of every article as well as on the top of the website. If you are an MMA, boxing, or fitness business and interested in sponsoring our website or radio podcast, send us an email. Advertising at realcombatmedia.com. Once again, that is advertising at realcombatmedia.com. Make sure to check out the Real Combat Media MMA and boxing store at the top of the menu at realcombatmedia.com. We carry a collection of products. We have the Cardio Mask, which is excellent for all fighters, endurance athletes, and serious fitness enthusiasts. Once you are in the Real Combat Media store, click on the banner on that page. We also carry Alpha Brain. Alpha Brain is a great and natural product which activates your brain's neurotransmitters and helps you think more clearly, which improves brain function. You can also purchase the world's healthiest plant protein, which comes from hemp. There are many other products online on the online store, and click on the On It banner at the Real Combat Media store, and you can purchase Alpha Brain and other health products. Use the discount code Real Combat Media, and you will receive 10% off at the checkout store on the On It. That is ONNIT on the banner at Real Combat Media store. Buckle up. Here we go. Let's get this show started.
All right, we are live once again, Real Combat Media MMA Radio. Find us at Twitter at Real Combat Media and Real Combat Media on Facebook. I am on here. I am your host. My name is Isaac Lamford, amateur fighter, and my younger brother Thor Lamford is joining me. And from Memphis, Tennessee, Michael Wurst is on the panel as well. You can talk to us if you call 347-324-5998. And we're ready to talk about this upcoming weekend of fights. And there are plenty of fights to talk about. I'm going to start on Friday night. We have Bellator coming to us. Again, you know, I keep insulting these Bellator cards, and they keep kind of proving me wrong, so I'm not even going to say anything bad against them. Most notably, we're seeing here lightweight tourney semifinal, Saad Awad against Will Brooks, and Alexander Sarnovsky against Ricardo Trelawney. And then we, of course, have, you know what? Hang on just one second here. All right, I just wanted to make sure that this is the 25th card. I got scared there for a second. I am right on this. This is the 26th card. My apologies there for just a second. Scared myself. Good fights. I mean, of course, you know, when we start getting to the semifinals, it means something, and that's important. You know, whenever you're watching fights, what you have on the line is a big deal. That's cool. What's crazy to me about what we have going on here is I'm looking at, they have Salia Musiglia, Mighty Mo. This is what threw me off. This is why I went back and watched. He is fighting Ron Sparks, and he just fought Dan Charles on September 20th. Like that, those are pretty close together. This has to be a replacement fight here. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, that's too quick a turnaround.
Yeah, especially because we're talking about a guy who up until September hadn't fought since 2010. And he picked up, and he fought into the third round this time, too, to pick up the TKO. I mean, Mighty Mo he's a great kickboxer, all that, you know. And Ron Sparks, I think he definitely has the edge there because Ron Sparks is, a bit of a brawler just coming forward. But, yeah, that threw me for a loop for a second. I had to make sure this was the right card, so not sure what's going on there. It's a quick turnaround for Mighty Mo. Good luck to him on it. But otherwise, talking about the lightweight semifinals here, Alexander Sarnovsky and Ricardo Trelawney. Sarnovsky, really tough dude, 24-1. I mean, this guy is a beast. Coming out of Russia, he's on a 4-fight winning streak. He lost a split decision to Rich Clemente in 2012, and it's his only loss on his record. It may just have been his first fight in America as well, as I scroll down very quickly. But otherwise, he's 3-1 in Bellator, and he's picked up one fight otherwise. Mayor's Cup and Pancration, FIFO MP, and the referee was Dmitry Sazonov, so I'm going to guess that was a Russian fight there. And he most recently took out Marcus Davis. And he's taking on Ricardo Trelawney, who is tough Brazilian, 30 years old, looks like he's about 45, hardened by life and fighting for sure, who just beat Rich Clemente after 2 losses in Bellator. You know, let's just do math here. You compared it to Alexander Sarnovsky's most likely coming out with the win here. You got Trelawney, he's got a lot of submissions, a few TKOs, a few decisions, pretty well-rounded guy, 16-4. You put it against 24-1 when a guy finishes by submission in the majority of his fights, 14 of 24 wins by submission. I think we're going to see Sarnovsky moving on to the next round. And on the opposite side of the bracket, Will Brooks, hot prospect Will Brooks, 11-1, taking on Saad Awad, who also fine record 15-5 himself, but I think you have to give the edge to Will Brooks in this one as well. I'm calling for a Sarnovsky-Will Brooks final to see who's going to get the shot at the champion after the pay-per-view in November. Do you guys have predictions? Do you lean one way or the other? Do you know more about these fighters than I do? Mike, I'll start with you.
No, I agree with you. I watched Sarnovsky's last fight, and he's either a submission guy or knockout. He doesn't mess around. He doesn't fool around. He's all business. I think he'll take out Trelawney, and then I agree with you. I think Will Brooks will take out Awad, and it's going to be I think it's going to be Will Brooks and Sarnovsky in the final, and I think Sarnovsky's going to end up getting the shot at the title.
Yeah, I'd say that's if you go in that far with prediction, that's not a bad one to make. Thor, what do you think about these guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the safe prediction, and I agree with it. And I actually the only reason I already forget the Russian guy's name, but I've heard about this guy before that loss. I saw like an article on him. Just the very impressive record and the finishes and stuff. So yeah, I mean, he's elite.
Yeah, tough guy, and I mean, it is one of those. That's 24-1. That's a crazy record, and you can always say it's like, well, he was fighting in Russia. They're probably hand-picking opponents for him, blah blah blah. But he's in the States now, and he's doing very well over here. So good prospect to keep an eye on. And I think it's better for these guys that cross the ocean for the first time to be in Bellator rather than the UFC because it's a better testing ground for them to work their way up. I don't think a lot of organizations like XFC and LFC and all these have the money to bring over this many international fighters, so you kind of have to go to the bigger card. Better to start with Bellator, in my opinion. Speaking of the other organizations in UFC, World Series of Fighting 6 is happening on Saturday night, the 26th. Really solid card here. Two notables on the undercard are Luis Firmino against Jacob Volkman and Pablo Alfonso against Miguel Torres. Then you get into the main card. You have Justin Gaethje, I don't know how to pronounce that name, unfortunately, against Dan Lozon, Marcelo Afaya against John Fitch, Carson Beebe against Marlon Moraes, and Josh Berkman against Steve Carl in the main event. I think appropriate. We talked to Josh Berkman on the show several weeks ago about the fight with Steve Carl. Steve Carl is a tough guy. He's seen a resurgence of success since leaving Bellator, but Josh Berkman just looks nasty nowadays, and I think it's kind of hard to pick against him. John Fitch is the one guy I think right now in World Series of Fighting who I might have picked over Berkman, and I probably did at the time that they fought, but he's probably still the only guy that I would even gamble against Josh Berkman. Do you feel the same way on this, Thor?
Yeah, I do. Berkman, I mean, you got to just the John Fitch finish alone, he's definitely on a resurgence. You guys interviewed him and talked to him, and it just seems like his mind is in the right place for the age he's at. All the experience coupled with being healthy and happy where he's at World Series of Fighting.
Sure. Mike, what do you think about the main event for World Series of Fighting for the inaugural welterweight title?
Yeah, I agree with you. We talked to Josh, and he sounds like he's ready to go. After taking out John Fitch, I don't see him having any problem. It's going to be a tough fight with Steve Carl, but I think he'll come out on top. Yep.
Josh Berkman across the board for us here. Carson Beebe against Marlon Moraes. Carson Beebe's a beast, and Thor and I, we've seen Carson fight, here locally because I think he claims Chicago, but he's just very close to our area. Brady, that we just talked to, would fight him. Their training partner, James, fought him as well. But Carson has kind of stumbled when he's taken the step up. He didn't make it into the Ultimate Fighter house when he auditioned. He really got a controversial win in his last fight against the guy's name's escaping me at the moment, Joe Murphy. It was a unanimous decision in World Series of Fighting, but the crowd booed it very heavily. And against Marlon Moraes is dangerous. And I got to say, I think that this is going to be a very tough for BB to pull off. And one thing that does surprise me is, Thor, correct me if I'm wrong here, but BB generally around here fights at 145, does he not?
Yeah, that's where he was fighting, but I think he beefed up there for a while, and then he started losing the muscle again because he told me he got real tired when he fought Brady.
Yeah, because they've got him. I mean, he's in the bantamweight division in World Series of Fighting, which is probably a better fit for him, and that's good. But I just think, given his style, I just think that Marlon Moraes, who, equal submission, KO, decision, really well-rounded guy, and Carson Beebe is a grappler. And I just think this is a really tough fight for him. I'd like to stick by him for being a local guy, but my gut's telling me that Marlon Moraes is going to take this fight. Are you very familiar with these guys, Mike?
No, I'm not familiar with them at all.
Yeah. And you still get this. That's the World Series of Fighting is still on this level where they've got some marketable names, mostly because they were ex-UFC guys, whatever, and they're trying to work the prospect angle as well, Carson's a 14-2. Marlon is a 11-4-1. So, and they're the co-main event here, so they're definitely trying to build up their own prospects as well, and that's a good thing. Thor, do you think Carson has what it takes to take out Marlon?
Well, I have to say yes because, Carson, he fought Brady, like I said, that was at featherweight. Brady is now fighting at 155, and he did pretty well in the wrestling. He caught Brady with a real hard punch in the beginning of the fight. But, I when I see him fight, I see, he's decently balanced for being a very good grappler. He's obviously a grappling-based guy, but he's powerful, and that's the thing. A guy can get hurt and save himself by getting a takedown, and, it's going to be hard to tap that guy.
Yeah, no, and you're definitely right about that. I think it will be interesting. I think this is a very appropriate fight and a challenge for both, and we'll see who comes off. Just because of time constraint, I'm going to say, in my opinion, John Fitch, Dan Lozon, Miguel Torres, Jacob Volkman are all heavy favorites against who they're fighting, although Dan Lozon, not as good a fighter as any of the rest of the people that we've mentioned on here. I don't mean to knock him too hard, but I think he's got probably the toughest fight ahead of him out of these guys, and that's the reflection in the betting odds as well. But I'm going to move on just so we can make sure we get to talk about the UFC in Manchester, England that's happening the same night as World Series of Fighting. It's a fight night, so it's on Fox Sports 2. If you have NBC Sports Network, you can record the World Series of Fighting, and if you have Fox Sports 2, you can record this. I don't have either, so I'm going to be having to catch these fights later. I'm not willing to pay the extra money. I had to pay extra to get Fox Sports 1, and I'm not willing to upgrade packages that far, no matter how much I love the fights. Maybe I can do a tax write-off for the radio show at some point. But UFC Fight Night, Michael Cooper, Brad Scott, Jim Hayes against Robert Whiteford, Cole Miller, Andy Ogle, Jessica Andrade against Rosie Sexton, Luke Barnett against Andrew Craig, Peter Hallman against Al Alaquenta, Phil Harris, John Lineker, Nicholas Mosecki against Alessio Sakara, Norman Park against John Tuck, Ryan Jimmo against Jimmy Manoa, Melvin Gillard, Ross Pearson, Lyoto Machida, Mark Munoz. Lyoto Machida stepping in as a replacement for, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. Who was Mark Munoz fighting?
Michael Bisping.
Yes, of course. It was in Manchester. Yes. Michael Bisping, I guess, an eye injury. He's out. Lyoto Machida makes his middleweight debut against training partner. I'm not sure if they're current training partners, obviously not for the camp, but I think they were still working together up until this point. Munoz against Machida. Very interesting. Munoz is solid. We're going to see what Machida looks like at middleweight. My guess is Mark Munoz is not going to be able to handle Lyoto Machida. His movement, his footwork, his takedown defense, his striking, everything about Lyoto Machida, I think Mark Munoz is going to have trouble with. Advantage for both. They've trained with each other. They know. I'm sure Munoz has figured out some ways to take down Machida in training. but I got to think that Machida all around too much for Munoz to handle. Mike, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't see him coming out with a win here. I just think Machida's too much for him.
Yeah, Thor?
I think it's going to come down to the conditioning of the fighters, and to me, it looked like Munoz's last fight. He kind of faded and then came back, and Lyoto, you can't fight him. You can't fade at all. He'll knock you unconscious. And Munoz doesn't have the best chin, so I would call Lyoto by a stoppage.
I think that's a safe bet. Mark Munoz, his most dynamic aspect of his game is he has some of the most brutal ground and pound in the sport with a great wrestling base that keeps him on top of you, and he just, something is, innate in his body. He delivers serious punches from that position. I mean, he has great wrestling. He could get anyone in that position, but Lyoto Machida has been taken down very few times in his career, and the speed, maybe he will not be as much of a speed advantage as he has been at light heavyweight, but I got to think he's still faster. His footwork's amazing. His takedown defense, they always like to credit the sumo training. I think stoppage is probably the right thing. I think that Lyoto is going to catch him because it's been a while since we've seen it, but Munoz, for the beginning of his UFC career, he used to get dropped in every single fight. His technique's gotten better, and so he keeps his chin protected more. But his chin's not the best, and I think Thor's right. I think we're going to see probably a vintage Lyoto Machida blitz attack that takes out Munoz, and Lyoto has what it takes to finish him on the ground. And so I think that, we can all agree Lyoto Machida is the favorite here. But it's one of those, Mark Munoz is a tough enough competitor that I'm not writing him off here. This is going to be a fight worth watching. It's not a garbage matchup or anything like that by any means. It's high level, and we'll see where Lyoto Machida immediately, right out of the gate, where he's going to stack up in the middleweight division. And that's an exciting thing because, especially right now, we have a champion that's not Anderson Silva. Who knows if it will stay that way? I don't think it will. But if Chris Weidman maintains that belt, that division's wide open, and we can see a lot of exciting stuff. I think the other fights worth mentioning here, Melvin Gillard against Ross Pearson. I like this fight. That's going to be a slobber knocker. Those guys are going to brawl. Knockout power, speed goes to Melvin Gillard for sure. Tenacity, meanness, and maybe technique goes the way of Ross Pearson. And look, Melvin Gillard is very, very talented, but I've seen the guy falter just too many times for me to ever pick him going into a fight. So Ross Pearson's my bet on this one, and maybe not scoring a knockout, although he looked really good in his last fight. But I think we'll see Ross Pearson by decision over Melvin Gillard. I'll run down a few quick here and then let you guys each take your own shot at them. Ryan Jimmo against Jimmy Manua. I'll pick Jimmo in this one. Jimmo's good against mid-level talent. Luke Barnett, we're going to see, very tall Brit, see what he's got inside the UFC. We'll see the women have been bringing it. Andrada, Sexton will be good. Cole Miller, Andy Ogle is a good fight. I don't know what to pick with Cole Miller anymore. I don't get the guy. Sometimes he impresses, sometimes he looks flat. I'm not really sure where it stands, but I think he still probably is better than Andy Ogle. Those are my quick picks running down the list. And, Mike, I'll let you, whatever fights stand out to you here, let us know on this card right now.
Yeah, I pretty much just look at the top three fights. So I've already got Machida. I agree with you on Melvin Gillard. I wouldn't pick him if he paid me to pick him. I have to go with Ross Pearson and kind of the home field advantage on that one. I think he gets a decision. And then I think Ryan Jimmo's going to knock out Manawa. So I think that's my take on the card.
Cool. Thor, what is this card? Anything stick out to you here?
I agree with your picks. I would say that Melvin Gillard and Ross Pearson, I think what we're going to see is what has happened to Melvin in the past, where a guy like Ross Pearson, you think he might try to stand with him, and Melvin gets crunched up and taken down, and, I think Ross Pearson has the advantage there and, has tried to show sometimes that he's got wrestling and that this is probably the fight to do it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that is a solid prediction there that we're going to see some ground game and probably come off a knockdown is my assumption because Gallard's pretty good at stuffing takedowns unless guys are fantastic wrestlers. But I could see Pearson getting him up against the cage, maybe mixing it up with him too, like surprising him with a single leg or something against the fence for sure. What do you think? Like Ryan Jimbo is an interesting character, Thor. Like I don't know about Ryan Jimmo. I'm always on the fence about whether or not he's going to be a world beater, and I think it's maybe because he went on such a long decision streak in MFC. He's a solid talent. He's got a weird mix of power, but still like using evasive karate technique. Do you think Ryan Jimmo is going to make a difference in the UFC light heavyweight division?
You know, I mean, yeah, he's got. I mean, it's so easy to get sucked into thinking a guy is, you know, not quite as good as you think he is, and then you see like the performance, you know, where you know, like Kung Lee hitting Rich Franklin with that knockout, you know. There you
right.
see, you know, yeah, he spins a lot, you know, he did a lot of fancy stuff, but he didn't catch anybody, but he's an elite striker, and, you know, sometimes you can get sucked into sleeping on a guy, and, you know, I think Jimmo, he's got a lot of potential to make a big difference.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Jimmo can get out of the mid-range, at least like working his way close to that top 10, like be in the top 15 and fight more notable talents, and we'll be able to see where he stands a little bit more because he's got all the talent in the world. This guy went on a huge winning streak that the only loss was like an unofficial fight to get into the Ultimate Fighter house, and then he went back and continued the win streak, you know, until finally getting to come over. So he's definitely a guy to watch and try to see what would be a great prospect fight. One of the guys in the light heavyweight division I'm real hot on right now is the Ovince St. Peru, and those are two different guys that I'd like to see maybe fight each other and or just watch their progression through this really stacked division.
Yeah.
But hey, guys, we did it in a timely fashion tonight. That's our show. We got the previews, we got the recaps, we got the interviews in. I do want to thank for sure Brady Hovermale and Quinn Mulhern for coming in on the show. We'll be back next week. Hopefully David Hewitt will be recovered from this Asian flu that he's got and joining us. Mike Wurst, do you want to plug your Twitter?
Yeah, it's at SoccerGuy39.
And excuse me, I'm having a coughing fit. Thor, your Twitter, please.
Yeah, it's just at Thorilla.
Oh, I have a Twitter as well. Isaac Lampert, ISAACLANDFERT. I desperately need some water. Thank you for listening. Hit the Twitter, Real Combat Media, Facebook, Real Combat Media. Mike and Thor, thank you very much. Everybody, we will see you next time.